All right, guys, welcome back to the Make or Break show. We're hanging out with Matt Cremona today, calling in from Minnesota, bright and early. He is an amazing maker of all kinds of things, especially with trees, but we want to welcome you to the show, and thanks for hanging out with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to kind of get into your backstory and how you got into making, because I know you didn't really have any formal like education as far as college, all that concerned, but like was that something like when you were a kid, like were you always kind of like tinkering with stuff, or is that something that kind of came a little bit later in your life?
I think I've always been like a tinkerer, just kind of, making things, or just, I don't know, exploring that side of things for sure. Like when I was a lot younger, not many things would stay put together. So like all of my toys would be taken apart for whatever reason. I have no idea why I took everything apart, but I was one of those kids that they got some like remote control car or like, battery car or battery toy or whatever, took it apart, took the motors out and just ran the motors connected to a 9-volt battery because that seemed like a cool thing to do. And it kind of went from there, I guess. But I guess early on, just kind of had that little bug inside of me, and look at me now, I guess.
Yeah. So was it like mechanical stuff you kind of leaned towards, like as far as like electronics and motors and batteries growing up?
Back then, like this is like when I was like under 10.
Yeah.
It was that kind of stuff, mostly because it was just there and accessible. But like I'd go outside and build tree forts and tree houses in the forest and things like that as well. I don't know, as I got older, when I was in high school, I was into computers and electronics, building computers, and I did a lot of mods on Xboxes back then when that was a big thing.
Oh, yeah.
And I did a lot. I think by the time I was like a sophomore in college, I had like modded like everybody's Xbox on my floor in my dorm.
That's awesome.
I'm pretty sure. It's like, once they saw what I could do, they're like, maybe you want to do that for me too? I'm like, sure, why not?
That's when I was in college, we definitely had that guy that we'd go to, because that was, I guess I started college in 2005, and so we couldn't do like any online Xbox stuff. It was all like local area network stuff, and so there'd be like this one guy who could like mod everything up to where like the whole campus would be connected, and he was like the go-to guy, which is really cool.
That's what I did.
Yeah.
Same time too, 2005.
Oh yeah, you were the go-to guy then. So you went to University of Wisconsin, is that right?
Yeah, in La Crosse.
Okay. And you were a business major, like finance? Was that?
I majored in finance, minored in information systems, and I never finished my photography minor.
Oh, photography minor. Cool. Real cool. So when you were going through college, like when you graduated, were you still kind of set like, hey, this is the direction I want to go? Or did that kind of like maker bug? Was that something like you're still always doing kind of as a side project or hobbies?
Yeah, it was always a side thing. Photography kind of took over that aspect of my life for a while. I was really into just doing like photo walks, just kind of going out and taking pictures of whatever I saw, wherever I was walking. And that was a pretty big hobby of mine. That's kind of making, in a sense. You're kind of making pictures out of light. And I guess when I was in college, I also started woodworking as well as another outlet to make things and to have some kind of tangible stuff as opposed to the digital things I was doing in photography. And even the print stuff I was doing in school, it's a little different than making something that's actually like usable for something. Yeah.
What was your first like wood project that you remember working on?
So the first thing that I did to get into woodworking was refinish this old hutch that was in our house we were renting.
Okay.
And then that drove me into, I had to do some repairs on that, so I got to do some woodworking on that. And then that drove me into my first real project, which was like a basket holder that my wife wanted.
Oh, cool.
She was my girlfriend back then. We had seen something similar at IKEA, and I thought I could make something a little better, so I made this like plywood cube basically, and baskets in it. Pretty basic.
Yeah.
but that's kind of what started it all, I guess.
Was there a project that like really drew you in? Like, were you still kind of doing a little bit of everything, or like at what point were you like, all right, the wood side of things, like this is what I'm really passionate about?
I don't know if it was one particular project, but as I kind of kept making things, within a year, I was pretty much hooked, and I didn't do anything else with my free time. I guess besides video games, I still kind of played those back then, but I don't have much time for those anymore. But yeah, just kind of over like a year or so, and then when I graduated a couple of years after I started woodworking, I had a little more money, and then it really went, I'll say, downhill from there.
Yeah, yeah. Now you were working for like a medical records company. Did I see that right? Once you got
Yeah,
out of
that's right.
college,
Yeah, I
it's
started there before I was actually graduated, but yeah.
so. How did you transition from that into after that? Was it full time making? Like, was that kind of your next step?
After the software job,
Yeah, after the software job. Yeah.
yeah, I got laid off from that, and then I was like, what do I want to do with my life? I had that kind of moment, and decided to take a chance and do what I'm doing now, which has paid off quite well. I'm very happy I made the decision not to get another job like that
Yeah.
because I'm way happy now.
Yeah, yeah. Was that 2014? Is that
Yeah, I got laid off like December 15th,
okay?
2014, something like that, right before Christmas. Yeah.
And then that next year is when he got, because I was going through your YouTube like all the way. I was like, what's the earliest video? And it was like a weekly update from like all the way back in
Oh yeah.
2014. So
Yeah, I started the weekly updates as a way to kind of get better at talking and just be more comfortable with communicating,
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
guess. So I'm like, how hard could it be to sit in my shop and just tell people what I did this week?
yeah.
Very, very hard, by the way.
It's like you got to be like more animated and like you can't just be like just sit there talking
It's
like you normally would with
for
somebody.
whatever reason you put a camera in front of people and suddenly you can't talk anymore. I don't understand.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So your girlfriend, were you married at the time when you went full time?
Yeah, we were.
What was that conversation like with her?
Um, I don't know. She was oddly okay with it.
Yeah.
We were expecting our first child, so
Oh, cool.
she kind of figured that if anything, we'll save money on childcare
Yeah.
because I would be in charge of watching this child, which I was for until he was 8 months old, and I was
Okay.
trying to do the content creation as well with a infant.
Oh, wow.
So that was taxing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What's your wife do?
She's an attorney.
Okay, cool. So once you had started then in 2014, was there like any early moments when you're like, hey, this can actually work? Like this isn't just me kind of testing. Like I can do this as a career.
Other people were doing it, so I figured that's enough validation for
Yeah,
me
yeah, yeah.
that it's technically possible, and it's all up to me at that point to kind of find the way to make it possible for me.
Gotcha. That's cool. Who were the people you were watching like at that point?
Uh, David Picciuto and Bob Claggett, um, April Wilkerson. Who else was around back then? There's a bunch of people that started around that time. Nick Ferry, Jay Bates. I don't know. The people that are like established now
Yeah.
are kind of like younger back then.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
There wasn't as many people back then as there are now.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Uh, I'm trying to remember the project. It was like a dovetailed, like it was almost like a small cabinet. It was like one of your first like build videos. And it's
My tea chest.
T-chest, yeah.
Yeah.
Did that one just kind of take off as far as people like seeing it and viewing it?
Yeah, that's the one that kind of put me into the upward movement that I'm in right now, or
Yeah.
I've been in. So before that, I had just done my shop update, and I was just really just doing it to kind of find my voice and wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with my channel. And I did that video as my first build video, and that was featured on Dave Picciuto's, it was the weekly woodworking wrap-up review back then.
Oh, yeah.
And I had started in January, and from January until June, I had got up to 100 subscribers, and then overnight it doubled, and then it just kept going from there. So I really owe a lot of my early success to David's showcasing of my work and sharing my work with his audience.
That's cool. That's cool. What was it like once you saw that share and like stuff started taking off?
Well, it was incredible because I watch that show every week, and I love it, and I still love it, even though he doesn't do it anymore. It's still nostalgically,
Yeah.
like, that's what I would do. It came out on Tuesdays or
Okay.
Friday. I forget what day it was, but that's like I would wake up in the morning, and I'd be there, and I'd lay in bed and watch it, and I'd be like, this is so cool. And I'm going to watch all these other videos. So I found a lot of people's videos through him. And I thought that was just a really cool medium. And then one day he's like, surprise, here's a video about you.
So you didn't know it was going to be on there. Like you actually watched the video and it was there.
He doesn't say it ahead of time. So, I mean, you can cheat by going to the video and looking at the description first before watching it to see who was featured. But I didn't. And then he was talking about how this video only has like 50 views or 100 views or something like that. And he was talking about it. He's like, said always really nice things about me. And it's amazing what someone that you look up to saying that those things about you can really do to motivate you to do even more and really drive you to even more success.
That's cool. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So you've got like a mechanical background, you've got electronics background, you've got a photography background. What kind of drew you to more of the traditional like woodworking like early on?
Yeah, I have no idea.
Was it just like I need stuff around the house? Like my wife wants me to build something?
I think the projects that I choose are definitely, there's like two sides of it. There's like things that we actually need, and then there's things that I think would be interesting to make. And a lot of the things that I make or the way that I make them are specifically there to challenge myself to be a better woodworker, to gain new skills, because I'm just not comfortable doing things the same way all the time and constantly. I need to be challenging myself so I get better. Otherwise, I'm stagnant. Yeah. So a lot of things I do are kind of driven by that idea.
Gotcha. So getting into more traditional joinery and traditional woodworking, you're like, this is a rabbit hole that I can learn a lot of stuff in.
It seemed a little more challenging than whatever I was doing at the time.
Yeah. What was one of the harder like techniques or skills like you remember learning? Like, was there one you just like really struggled with for a while before you kind of got it down?
I don't know, maybe dovetails. But I think everybody kind of has that same kind of thing at first.
Yeah.
With them, I mean, I used the router jig at first, and then actually I did hand cut, then I did router jig, and then I went back to hand cut, and I haven't gone back again. I don't know. That was just, I think more with that, my actual problem was I didn't understand how to sharpen a chisel or like what a sharp chisel was. So I think that really didn't help me in my learning, because I got really frustrated because I'm like, why is this not working? Oh, because you've never sharpened this chisel, you use it right out of the box, and you've been using it for 6 months, and you've never sharpened it. I wonder why it's not working like people's videos show. Yeah,
the sharpen stuff. I just recently tried to like cut joinery like for the first time, like doing like some mortise and tenons, and I had some like just beater chisels. And then I was like, I should probably like try sharpening these. I'm like, wow, this is a lot easier when they're actually sharpened. So it was cool. So how did you get into then like going from like a raw tree to lumber to furniture? Was that another just kind of natural? Like you just kind of wanted to get what's the kind of the next step?
I was a poor college student, and the thought of spending hundreds of dollars on materials when I could spend hundreds of dollars on tools didn't really appeal to me. So very early on, I needed to figure out a way to get my material costs down as much as possible, because I was working like a part-time job. I think I'm making $7 an hour, working like 12 hours a week. That's not much income to really do much with.
Yeah.
So yeah, just definitely a cost savings thing. So one of the first investments I made was a little jointer planer combo machine, and that thing paid for itself like so many times over. I think I paid $300 for it, and in 2 projects it had paid for itself because I was able to go buy some rough sawn lumber from a guy on Craigslist. I think I bought it was like oak and cherry I bought for $1 a board foot, when comparatively I was paying $7 a board foot for surface lumber at the home center for red oak. So my material costs dropped drastically. And then from there, I'm like, let's get it down even further. So I started buying wet lumber from a mill and then drying it myself. So that saved me even more money. And then eventually I started just milling my own.
Yeah.
So I have 0 direct material costs now.
Yeah. So when you mentioned you started that in college, like, did you just have lumber just like in your room? Like, which is just like stuff just stacked up, like drying?
We had rented a house.
Okay.
So there was 4 of us in a house. And then my last year I moved to another house where it was just me and one other roommate. We had a detached garage at both places. And in the first house, we had the basement, which was, I kind of took over as my shop, as well as the one car garage outside. But that wasn't heated, so it was like terrible out there in the winter. I had my table saw out there, so I like run outside, make a cut quick, and then run back inside and like warm up again because it was so cold all the time. Well, yeah, my assembly table was a beer pong table.
Okay. That's awesome. Just move this stuff over. That's good. That's really cool. So when did you, all right, so you started getting, I guess, lumber, as far as like trees that had fallen down, or like you're cutting down your trees. At what point were you like, hey, I should start working on my own like bandsaw, like meal? Like, was that something you always knew? Like, hey, I want to build this like crazy thing like out in my backyard?
No, I always thought that would be a lot harder or like impossible to do. I looked at that like a long time ago. Even when I saw mills like in person that are manufactured, I'm like, I have no idea how this goes together. How will this even be possible? So there was always that thing holding me back. But was it like last summer? I'm like, maybe I should just do this and see how it goes. It'd be a good learning experience, if anything, and people will probably like watching it. So that's kind of how that happened, I guess. Not so much because I needed it, more so because I wanted to challenge myself in a whole new area and see how entertaining it could be.
Yeah. Well, I think that's when I first started to see some of your stuff, especially on Instagram, was like those videos of you, like when you're pushing the sliders, or like when it first started. And I'm like, what is this guy doing? Like, this is insane. And like, I started watching your stuff, and it was fun to see, like when you were learning to weld, it was like,
oh yeah,
you were like, you're working on like a big project, and you're like, yeah, I'm learning to weld right now. Like, here's my first one. I'm like, what? Like, this is so cool. So, what is it that you like, you don't seem nervous at all, like to try like those big things? Like you just kind of dive in, like if you're interested.
Yeah. What's the worst that could happen?
Yeah.
You fail and you lose some money, but you learn a lot in the process. And I'll tell you what, I paid a lot of money to learn things that I don't use every day anymore. So by comparison, spending a few $1,000s to practice welding and mechanical engineering in your backyard, even if it doesn't actually work, it's cheaper than going to school for it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You'll probably retain it a lot better.
Yeah. I went to school for engineering, for like aerospace engineering. And I'm like, man, I still remember like building like rockets when I was like a kid. Like I remember more of that versus like school stuff. So like I could make a rocket then, I can't now. So,
yeah.
So as you've got more into like mechanical stuff, like, do you see yourself doing more of that in the future? Or are you still kind of like, I love like traditional furniture?
And that stuff's all a means to an end for me. It's just a way for me to, make lumber that would eventually get turned into furniture. But I enjoy it. I think I'll keep challenging myself to do something out there with the lumber stuff that, improves the efficiency or makes it more interesting. The mill will be getting hydraulic log handling at some point. That's the next thing on there. And then I'm going to teach myself some stuff about automation so I can just have it spit lumber out for me. And then from there, we'll see. I don't know. I like to make some kind of crane thing at some point to lift the whole logs off the trailer and just drop them right on the mill. So I don't know. I have a lot of things in the back of my head. Just, time more than anything.
Yeah, that's really cool. Man, the automation stuff and the crane would be really sweet. And I was actually going to ask, you may have just answered it. Is there like a big like means to an end project that like you have out there, like you want to make, or is it just kind of add-ons to stuff that you've already got?
As far as the mill?
As far as the mill, or like if there's like another like a big like a mechanical type project that you're like, hey, this would be great to add to my arsenal.
I don't know, not off the top of my head, besides just like the material handling stuff at this point, but who knows?
That's cool.
I don't know.
That's real cool. What's also I really like about especially your YouTube channel is like you started with like the weekly updates, and then like I was watching your most recent video, which was like a weekly update, and like what's been really cool is like you see your like personality, like even always way back into the first one in 2014, like all the way to today. Like you're just, I don't know, you just seem like you're just down home and like you're like not in a bad way, but like you enjoy what you're doing, and it's cool. What's looking back on these, I guess, 3 years? Like what's kind of that journey been like for you?
The whole thing?
Yeah, like just like if someone was like looking back on it, like did you think like the 2014 Matt would be where you're at now? Like
Oh, heck no. No. No, because well, and back then I just kind of started it for fun and just kind of as self-improvement, and then just kept getting like more and more of a thing, and then it just kept growing, and I don't know, it just really just kept drawing me in, and I don't think that me back then would like fully understand that, in a few years this will be your living.
Yeah,
you'll literally just be in your shop talking to yourself, and then answering comments and emails on the internet.
Yeah,
that's your job.
Yeah.
I don't think I would believe that, or if I did, I'd be like, I'm probably not making any money doing it. So yeah, I don't think I believe. I would definitely not believe that story.
Yeah, that's crazy. So you have two sons, is that right? JR and Max.
Yep.
Are they getting like old enough, or I guess your oldest, is he getting old enough to like to be able to do stuff around the shop, or?
Well, he's 2 and change.
Okay.
So, I mean, when he goes in the shop, it's like, how much of a mess can I make?
Okay, yeah.
Let me dump all these screws on the floor.
Yeah.
And then run away. So he's good at making a mess.
Yeah.
There's that, I guess. He likes helping me burn scraps in the fireplace, running around the yard and climbing on the sawmill. He likes that a lot. His mom was not like that part, but he likes climbing that thing a lot. So I think he'll be pretty comfortable with the stuff going on here.
Yeah.
At least, hopefully.
Yeah. That's really cool. Well, one thing I definitely wanted to talk to you about before we kind of wrap up is just your approach to like lumber, like from like raw materials, especially for folks that like may never have like experienced that. Like, is there like a good like gateway drug, so to speak, that you like recommend? Like if folks want to be like, hey, I really want to get into like getting my own, like sourcing my own lumber and drying it. Like, is there like easy ways you recommend folks kind of stepping into that?
I guess it depends on how much you want to spend, and I guess how much you do. I mean, sourcing material, depending on where you live, if there are trees growing there, sourcing material is probably going to be pretty easy. People are always cutting down trees for various reasons, and they're always looking to get rid of them because they need to get rid of them. So most of the time you can get the actual raw, log or tree for free, usually.
Yeah.
And then from there, I mean, depending on how big it is, if you're just doing some small stuff, you might be able to do some small boards on like your bandsaw, your table saw in your shop, if it's that small. A little bigger than that, a chainsaw, and you can always do some freehand chainsaw milling if you want to try that. Your yield's probably not going to be as great unless you are somehow super precise with your ability to cut a log into slabs by hand. Otherwise, chainsaw mill attachment for a chainsaw is fairly inexpensive and can kind of help guide the saw through the cuts. And that's the way I kind of went with the lumber production here on my property. You can always have someone cut it for you. There's no shame in that.
Yeah.
You can bring that log to a sawmill or have a portable mill come out to you if you have enough there for them to come to you and cut it up that way. And then air drying is probably the easiest way to go. It's very hard to screw that up, and all you need is time for that. So it's pretty easy.
Do you have any good just like ballparks for like how long stuff takes to dry? Like I know it depends on like where you're at and weather and all that kind of stuff, but
man, it varies a lot depending on how it's stored and the conditions. So like the stuff here in my basement, I can usually do about an inch every 3 or 4 months, depending on the time of year.
Okay.
And then if it was like out like in my garage, if it wasn't heated, for instance, or in my shed, it would probably take like 8, 9, 10 months per inch.
Gotcha.
Because there's like no air circulation in there, and it's a lot more humid most of the year and all that stuff. So it does vary quite a bit, even just in this one, property.
Yeah. I know you've got a great series on that whole process, so I'll make sure to link if folks are definitely want to dive into the weeds on how it works, which is really, really cool. So as far as, so a couple questions we like to ask folks that come on. So it's the make or break show. And so we kind of split it up into like a make question and a break question. So of all of the projects you've worked on, doesn't have to be a video or anything like that. Is there one that really stands out as you're like, hey, this is my favorite project. This is the favorite one that I made.
It's definitely gonna be a secretary desk. I don't think that's going to change for the foreseeable future.
So what about the desk that, like, why was it your favorite?
It was so far above my skill set at the time when I started it that I figured I'd finish it, but I didn't know how much work it was going to be and how challenging it was going to be just from a learning perspective, because I literally hadn't done most of that stuff and to the scale that was on that desk. Is a huge project.
Yeah.
And I came out with, a nice piece of furniture, but I came out with something way more valuable, which is all of the experience and knowledge that went into building that big piece of furniture.
Yeah. That's cool. All right. So then on the break side of things, I'm sure you've had a few things go wrong at times. Is there one that really stands out? And like, maybe is there like a lesson you learned like because of it?
I've been lucky. I haven't had anything super crazy go bad on me.
Yeah.
I guess one thing that I like to tell for something like this is I built a bookcase for my sister a long time ago. I don't know when that was, 2012 maybe. It had glass doors on it and then some drawers beneath it, so it was kind of like a tall unit thing.
Yeah.
And I hung the doors on some hinges I got from the home center. Some really crappy hinges. Probably the biggest mistake I ever made in my life, because I spent all this time making this piece of furniture, and the hinges end up sagging, and the gap around the doors was perfect, and now it's like touching at the bottom, and it has this giant gap at the top.
Oh no!
So putting crap hinges on your project, because they're only like $3 a hinge, spend like $12, $15 on a hinge if you're gonna put 40, 50, 60 hours into a project.
Yeah. That's good. Sometimes, you got to sweat the small stuff because it really does matter.
Yeah.
That's cool. And one thing I forgot to mention, so you're also one of the co-hosts of Wood Talk, that podcast. How long have you been?
Oh, yeah, that thing.
Yeah, how long? Yeah, that thing. How long have you been on that with them?
Oh, God, almost 2 years already.
Okay, that's cool.
It'll be 2 years in January.
What is that process? Because you mentioned like your job is like to talk to no one like on camera. Like, what's it like to sit down and talk to people like on a consistent basis that are like doing the same thing you're doing?
It's awesome. And that was another thing in my life where when they asked me to be a guest on the show, I was like, this is kind of scary because I don't know, I've listened to the show for like 6-8 years, whatever it had been.
Yeah.
Something ridiculous.
Yeah, they're like the OG.
Yeah. And I was like, I listen to every episode every week, and now you want me to be on the show? What is this going on here? How is this my life? And I don't know, it's just been so much fun, and just being able to connect with a couple of other people who do the same thing that I do and have the same struggles that I do, and we can kind of share in the little things that maybe our spouses might not understand because they're not in it with us every day as much. Well, Mark kind of has Nicole in there a lot more than any of us do for our spouses, but even that, there's certain things that are challenging for the people that are actually doing all this work and all of the content creation that you can kind of appreciate from getting together and talking to people that do exactly the same thing. And that's why I really like the meetups or the events where there's a lot of other people who do the same thing that I do, because it's really cool to talk to them, learn about their processes, and we can learn a lot from each other. And the community is just amazing. Everyone is super supportive and really open about everything. So it's great.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. That's really cool. Well, Matt, I appreciate your time and jumping on a call with me early morning. Is there, other than YouTube, is there a good place that you'd send folks if they want to check out the stuff that you're doing?
You can go to my website. That's mattcremona.com, and you can get links to all my stuff there. And there's some stuff there.
Yeah. And make sure and support Matt on Patreon. And there's a link, and there'll be a link in the show notes for that as well. So, and Wood Talk, you guys have a Patreon for that too. Is that right?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we do. Yep.
And I'll make sure to include a link for. So be sure and check that one out, guys. But man, I appreciate your time. It was a blast chatting with you. So
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
yeah, it's my pleasure.